Hello everyone and welcome. Sit back, relax, make a cup of tea or whatever you like to drink and get ready for news stories from Yellow Cat. Send your own favorite stories in the comments below and maybe they'll be in our new video. So subscribe to the channel if you're not subscribed yet. Let's get started. People on Reddit who quit their jobs in a fit of anger. What happened to the last straw? Part 3. I used to work in Santa Monica as a dailies tech for movies and television. It was my first real industry job, which I obtained after hounding a co-owner of the business for 18 months to get an interview. I was scraping by at Starbucks before I started working there, and I had studied filmmaking for my entire degree, so I planned to see where this job would take me. The job itself was challenging. I worked nights, 10 p.m. to 10 a.m., processing video footage and creating editorial packages 6 days a week. I worked into/through Saturdays. During my 2.5 years there, I gained weight, developed a disgusting beard, got acne again, and was generally unhealthy and depressed. But none of that really made me want to give up. The straw that broke the camel's back was listening to my supervisors talk trash about me behind my back after drinking every night. I didn't really interact with this group of traditional colorists and post-production guys until I started working later in the day. Within earshot, they would call me a moron and curse at my mistakes. I felt awful about it, and I didn't want to work for or be around such bigots who didn't value the sacrifices I made for my job. It took me a few weeks to get the guts to give up. Since then, more than 3 years have passed, and I haven't gone back to work in production. The taste left in my mouth by ungrateful coworkers/bosses was too awful for me to come back to. It was definitely spontaneous, but not angry. Around 2004, I worked as a third key, essentially a shift lead able to open and close without supervision, at a GameStop while I was a college student. Certainly still in the era of the corporate overlord, but prior to the complete collapse in service. The staff members were quite close-knit, socializing together after work and arriving early to spend time together before reporting for duty. We were proud to get to know our customers, give them the best service possible, make sure they enjoyed themselves, and make their time in our stores unique. The front counter of the Games of the Month display included a shrink-wrapped copy of Superman 64 along with its strategy guide, which had been traded in. Along the display shelves were action figures posing in amusing scenes. Putting a different name on each other's name tags and timing when they noticed, sending strange material we created using magazine cutouts to the other shops in the neighborhood via fax, casual gaming competitions. For the midnight launch of Halo 2, we were even granted permission to temporarily hire a few of our regular customers. Put succinctly, a corporate horror. Our previous regional manager, I may have misremembered her title, she likely managed 7 or 8 locations, wasn't too fond of how off-brand we were, which is understandable. We were completely off-brand. However, we also had excellent store performance with high reservation and subscription numbers, good trade-in numbers, all the stuff they normally look for. However, we weren't following GameStop's lead. We were at odds with the new regional manager for roughly a month. She ended up traveling from store to store in the district, using our store as her headquarters. Professionally flawless, but everyone was clearly dissatisfied with the extent to which our operations needed to be changed. Even so, as the pressure to live up to the standards increased, we continued to keep things light and enjoyable. I arrived one morning to open and check the Red Book, the daily log we updated with our daily objectives, notes for the following shift, and other routine information. I noticed that our store manager had been let go when I looked over the entry from the day before. We all knew that he was fired because he wasn't the kind of manager they wanted, but I called him to double check and he told me he had been fired for failing to meet a low-tier metric. Looking back, this was perfectly reasonable. They let go of a store manager because he wasn't managing the way they desired. Not only is it reasonable, but it's also most likely the best option from a business perspective. However, I found the corporate perspective to be uninteresting. My only concern was that the place, the work, and the people I held dear were all being utterly disregarded. This was the last straw for me because over the previous few months, I had seen our customers become less satisfied and my coworkers begin to care less about the work and the play. On my to-do list for the day, I wrote quit. To drop off my keys with one of the other managers, I drove to a different nearby location. I got home, fired up my Xbox, and started hunting for a new job. I played Knights of the Old Republic. Later that day, I learned from the assistant manager, who continued to work there for approximately a year but in a different capacity, that the store manager had been fired by the regional manager, who had come in and opened the store and run it herself until the closing shift arrived. It was satisfying. I don't list it on my resume, even though it was the best job I've ever had. Continued to communicate with a few of the guys. Before it was closed down, we managed to have a great time. I don't believe that the modification was beneficial. I was a secretary for a representative in the D.C. Office of Congress. A group of us, roughly 4 people, were tasked with responding to complaints from constituents by, among other things, returning calls, creating form letters, sending emails, etc. Then there were the policy guys, whose job it was to advise members of Congress on matters within their purview, draft legislation, and work out the kinks. The chief of staff, deputy chief of staff, and scheduler were the individuals in charge of running the office after that. Officially, their job is to ensure that everyone performs their duties. Informally, they advise members on how to vote and what'll make a good impression at home. They also communicate with other congressional offices to arrange votes on specific bills and assist members in making voting decisions on legislation that's highly politicized and receives a lot of media attention. As the representative of the constituents, we were essentially shut off from the rest of the office. We were asked to leave the room during the weekly office meetings so that the COS, DCOS, and policy guys could talk about specifics of legislation. After that, the policy guys were asked to leave and everyone else engaged in conversation about something. We were unaware of the members' voting behavior or motivation. Not even the specifics of the legislation were disclosed to us. After we spoke for a short while about the legislation, we were instructed to record the call in a database and tag the caller with the general topic of the call and their level of agreement or disagreement. If I ever strayed from the plan, I'd get a harsh talk from the chief. I basically had to provide them with as little information as possible. Form letters are supposed to be as ambiguous and meaningless as possible. We copied and pasted information from a base template for non-politically sensitive topics. The reason I'm telling you this is that we had a very contentious bill up for vote one day. The phones were ringing nonstop, the phone lines were backed up, and I had no idea how they were going to vote, even though the member was on the House floor during the vote count. And I was being yelled at by a number of, in my view rightfully, irate constituents, demanding to know how he was going to vote. I told them the truth. I had no idea. The chief of staff left early, but the following morning, furious, I stormed into his office and demanded to know why he hadn't told me or the constituents anything at all. To my honest surprise, he explained calmly that sometimes it's more politically advantageous to hold information until you absolutely must. Weeks before, they had already decided how the member would vote. They simply didn't want to deal with the political fallout from making the announcement in public. He claimed it would weaken our position. People wouldn't be nearly as likely to find out how a particular member voted once it was no longer in the news. Essentially, he was saying that I was the flak catcher while the controversy was waning. I lost my cool immediately and began yelling, to which he responded. I eventually threw my ID on his desk and left the building. I never returned, and I haven't communicated with him since. Later, when I spoke with one of my coworkers, she informed me that the member was astonished to hear that I was quitting. How bad is the homeowners association in your neighborhood? Part 3. The HOA was getting back on its feet financially after a few really bad years when we moved into our condo. Everyone had been putting money into the HOA board president's personal bank account for years because he was a good person. This was supposed to pay for much needed repairs to the outside, like fixing the sidewalks and carports, etc. He did take the money and run. He got away with it because there was no proof in place. The next HOA president was an even nicer person who was disgusted by what the previous president had done. He then took HOA money into his own bank account for a few more years. This was going to fix some badly needed things on the outside, like the sidewalk and carport. He did take the money and leave, though. Then everyone got smart and stopped putting money into someone's personal bank account. Things were in a pretty bad state when we got there, but it was our first place together, and we saved a lot of money by renting instead of buying. Oh my god. During my time at the HOA 55 and over Lodge, I worked at the front desk. I was the lead attendant, and it was my responsibility to treat each and every person as if they were royalty. There were a few wonderful people with whom I had the opportunity to interact, but for the most part, absolutely everyone, both men and women, were impolite and conservative a-holes. When I was opening my business at 6 in the morning, I experienced the most significant event of my life. In the lodge resort, I'm able to enter, activate the lights, unlock the gates, and prepare the theater and the exercise rooms. At the conclusion of my rounds, prior to opening the entrance, I always had 15 minutes to myself, during which I sat with a cup of coffee and a flat-screen television measuring 70 inches that was placed over the fireplace. I've always been someone who follows the news, and CNN has always been my go-to source. As soon as the clock strikes 7 in the morning, I unlock the doors and the morning crowd comes in. As soon as the group walks past the lounge area, I hear a collective gasp that sounds suspiciously like someone's passed away. Every resident starts screaming at me as soon as I get there because there's an unspoken rule that says this TV can never be changed from Fox News. That's no joke. In the later part of that day, I was reported to the board of directors and we had a productive conversation about their fundamental principles. As a result of being constantly yelled at, I decided to resign from my position. The residents were shocked to learn that they were required to submit an application in order to make any kind of modifications to their home, and that they needed to receive collective approval from the board before they could move forward. There was a lot of being in Canasta. Not the HOA, but the neighbor. The person who lives below us is a total jerk. He moved in when I was 10 and my brother was 6. We used to run around the house when we were kids. The floors in India are made of hard concrete, so he can't be bothered by us running. Someday he confronted us because we didn't like to argue. His behavior was not just bad toward us, but also toward his neighbors. It turns out that he had a high-end custom design done on his ceiling and didn't want anyone to mess it up. We didn't play at home again. After 13 years, I'm now 23 years old and we've decided to do some remodeling. He lost it and started to act mean. I got bigger and stronger than him during those years. When he got angry, I was about to punch this jerk, but my parents stopped me. We fought him in court using HOA rules. People thought he was a complete idiot. According to reports, he lost the battle, which hurt his ego a lot. Everyone he used to pick on fought back when we stood up to him, and he lost all control over it. Now everyone in our community only thinks of him as a jerk. He can't pick on or scare anyone anymore. A neighbor of his moved to Mumbai a year ago to be with his son after he retired. He stated renting it out, and within a week it was rented out to a mom with 2 small kids and their grandma. The job her husband has is in Hyderabad. She avoided confrontation, so he was bullying her. She told us about him one day while we were just chatting. We stopped him for her. We talked to her landlord and filed a formal complaint with the HOA. He was called in an HOA meeting and was grilled badly. Now he stays away from everyone and won't look at me. But I still feel bad that I didn't get the chance to punch. The board holds meetings at odd hours that are impossible for any working person to attend. Usually, they post a notice on a bulletin board in a section of the building that's rarely visited, giving less than a day's notice. The board will stall or sidetrack the meeting so that no vote takes place and we all learn of a crucial issue that needs to be voted on and make time in our schedules to attend. They will then subtly schedule another meeting for the following day or a few days later so that only those who agree with them attend and the vote passes. They recently increased our monthly fees by doing this. People made it a point to attend the 3 meetings, but none of them resulted in a vote. Subsequently, we all received letters stating that a meeting was held and a vote was conducted to increase the fees. There are some nasty old people on the board. So we decided it was time to change the board. One of the neighbors, a lawyer, decides to study all the rules to find a way to legally get rid of the old board. He does. Turns out that all those votes that were held do not measure the force as to increase the payment must be that the sitting would be minus 60% of all homeowners, and we were clearly not there. Po2, we, with all of this, come to the next meeting. They're trying to delay it, but not this time, idiots. You will not succeed. We decide everything now. We're bringing up the question of disbanding the old board and creating a new one. 75% of the homeowners vote. Immediately, Vidvigayutsa candidates for the new board of those 75%, and we elect them in an honest vote on all the rules of our HOA. The old jerks don't get a chance to say a word. Now all meetings are held when normal people have weekends and at a convenient time for the majority. And yes, the fees remain the same, no unreasonable increases. If you want to watch the part 2, click the link here. Thank you for subscribing, likes, and comments. We're very happy to see you all in the comments too. Thanks for support.